That's a good looking man right there. That's my husband. Um, and I let it play through just so you could see what all the pictures look like. But at 30 seconds in, the kid with the glasses and the afro, that's my son. So we had a farm. And so hopefully we'll build that farm up again sometime soon. So I promised you I'd be back real soon with more of information about what happens in the book of Ready Player One and compare a little bit to the movie. Although, as I said in the last video, the movie moves really quick. And obviously, it can't be like a 5-hour movie because there is a lot going on in the book that couldn't possibly be put in the movie and make it short enough to keep your attention. So, I left off on the last one where basically Parzival and Artemis break up, and they're kind of just hanging in limbo. So to pick right up where that left off, let me share my screen so you can see where I'm going with this. I mean, you don't really have to. If you really want to, you can go to Free Novel Reads website on your own and read the book. I always encourage you guys to read the book. So there's the tunnel of hell, just all of me, billions of me, off into infinity. So let's go look up here, the first page I wanted to cover. And I also had notes here too. So this is what I'm going to cover, right? There's going to be a Bryce Lynch Pac-Man in the museum, the Jade key in the game Zork, wrapped in a foil to get to the gate, and the death of Daito. I've mentioned it a couple times that in the novel, Daito is killed. And then Blade Runner to the gate and into the Black Tiger game. And the Giant Award, which he picks Leopardon. And Rush is one of the clues to the Crystal Key. So if you hear cats storming around my house, it's because they are in zoomy mode, and you might hear them running back and forth. So what happens after things settle down when Parzival and Artemis have their argument and break up? A few months go by. Parzival, since he has been discovered alive, pretty much has to hide and leave the van that he was living in. Since he had so many endorsements as a celebrity now, he has thousands and thousands and thousands of credits on Oasis. So he's able to kind of hide his avatar and purchase a part of a planet on his own and secure himself safely there. Now that Sorrento knows he's not dead, Sorrento's also going to try to find his living self in the real world. And so what Wade Watts does is he uses the millions of dollars he's acquired in the real world, and he moves from Columbus, Ohio, I think somewhere up into the city. He ends up renting an apartment in a high-rise building and hermits himself there. I forgot to look it up. There's a condition that some people have where they never leave their apartment or their house. And if they do, they get like sick and anxiety and stuff. So he pretty much turns into that person. He blacks out the windows, and all he does is pretty much live, eat, and breathe in the Oasis and try to immerse himself into whatever, distracting himself away from Artemis. So in the book, it talks about how he wakes up in his routine. He works out for an hour or two. He eats, and then he showers. And when he showers with one of those hair removal shampoos. And so he describes himself as a person who's not very attractive. He's completely bald and no eyebrows and stuff. And it's because he says it saves him the trouble of having to go somewhere and get his haircut. And it's just low maintenance. So he showers, and then he immerses himself in the Oasis for almost like 16 to 20 hours at a time. During that time, he sometimes dabbles a little bit in all these quests to try to increase his inventory as an avatar. And one of the other things he does is he actually reaches out to Daito and Shoto, and they do a few quests together. In one quest, it took them like 19 days to finally beat this quest. And when they got the award, it was like a pretty important thing. what was it called? It was called Hayata's beta capsule, right? A small metal cylinder allowed the avatar who possessed it to transform into Ultraman once a day for up to 3 minutes. Now, I think they touched on it in the movie. I can't remember, but somebody turns into Ultraman during the battle or something like that. But I do know that in the book, it becomes an important thing. So at first, they're saying the three of them finished the quest, so they didn't know who should take this capsule. And at first, Shoto offers that maybe Wade Watch should take it since this quest was his idea. But Wade ends up giving it to Daito in a very nice and honorable way. He said, "You two should keep the beta capsule. Yuruto Ramen is Japan's greatest superhero. His powers belong in Japanese hands." And I think Daito was quite touched with that. And so he says, "Thank you, Parzival-san. You are a man of honor." So he got it on Daito's good side because the last time they had kind of interacted was in the basement with H, and Daito was like, "No, we're not teaming up with anybody." So that it kind of sounds like in the months afterwards, a lot of dynamics in the characters changed. During that time, he and H kind of drift apart, and H was a little pissed at him, like, not really helping him out or anything. And so it just kind of changes the mood because it puts Wade Watts into a darker place. So then he goes on to talk about all the things that he ended up doing. Oh, so he creates for himself a fake identity in the real world. And, he's kind of into the hacking world, and he hacks these systems to create himself an identity of a person called Bryce Lynch. And if you don't know, there was a TV series called Max Headroom, and Bryce Lynch was one of the hackers. So since he's hacking and creating this, covert identity, he created himself as a person named Bryce Lynch. And at this point, Wade Watts has graduated high school, and he's still 18 years old. But his Bryce Lynch identity enables him to rent this apartment as a 22-year-old man that has I think he said, like, gave him some degrees or something, a college degree along with multiple technical certifications, so that he could get a job and just kind of lay low. Granted, he probably didn't need the job, but he just decided that it's the best way to kind of also keep him busy, bring in a little extra income in. And as he's working tech support for Oasis, he can kind of use cross-reference that time to also search for the next key. So he's working 10-hour days. It's grueling work, but for the most part, he's zoning out and just answering questions, right? And so he thought of this place as his own virtual hell because basically, he's on his own and he doesn't ever leave the apartment. In fact, I think he uses his money too to buy all these security measures so that nobody can come into his apartment while he's in Oasis. And he orders, of course, all his food to be delivered. Hydrate. All right. So he's basically hating life right now, and he's depressed, right? And then all of a sudden he realizes at one day that Artemis found the Jade key, right? So now the second key has been found. Sorrento's going to be hot on her heels. And so, like other Gunters on the globe, I'd been dreading the next change in the scoreboard. And then, of course, Sorrento and his guys are close behind her, right? So now the scoreboard, as you can see, is Artemis, and then Parzival will end up getting the key. But this is before he gets the Jade key. He's still in second place. And then H, Daito, Shoto, and then that's the number for Sorrento right there. So now that we know that there's this guy, Bryce Lynch, that Wade Watts has created in his real world identity, then he kind of decides, you know what? It's time I get off my crack and I start finding this key. So he's following clues around the different worlds, and he ends up in a museum of the old arcade games that was created by James Halliday. And he's kind of thinking this will help him figure out where the Jade key is. And along this trek through this giant virtual museum, he sees an old Pac-Man game in a pizza place, and it has a sign that says "Beat the high score for a free pizza." And then there's a quarter, and it's really weird because he's just like, it's so out of place. So he tries to grab the quarter, but he can't pull it. It's like it's glued or cemented to the wall. And so he figures, why not? I'll just play the Pac Man game. So he starts playing the Pac Man game to play the perfect score. I mean, this means you have to play Pac Man all the way through and beat it. I don't know about you guys, but when I play Pac Man, it's a lot of fun. I love it. I get about 3 or 4 games in, and then I keep dying. And then I'm just like, yeah, let's go on to Galaga. So he plays the perfect score of this Pac-Man. And then the weird thing is, it's like, congratulations, you win. And then the quarter that was cemented to the wall falls off. And Parzival thinks it's really weird, but okay, he takes the quarter and puts it in his inventory. Really strange. Now I want to go back to the movie, but early on in the movie, when Parzival and Artemis are in the museum or the library, there's the librarian, the robot librarian there, that they were talking about Kira Morrow and how she was only mentioned in the archives maybe twice. And the librarian's like, no, she's been, mentioned more than that. In that scene, Parzival says, I'll bet a quarter or something like that, right? And so the librarian looks it up, who ends up becoming Ogden Morrow anyway later on, but whatever. I guess he says, I lost the bet. You're absolutely right. And tries to throw Parzival the quarter. And Parzival's like, oh, a quarter. And he doesn't think anything of it. And there's this little exchange, but Parzival ends up with the quarter anyway. Well, that quarter does play a significant role, especially at the very end. So in the book, he doesn't get the quarter from the librarian. He wins it by playing this random Pac-Man game that he stumbled upon. He has no idea at the time what it can do or what it's for. But regardless, he has this feeling that he should keep it. So he does. He ends up moving on. And then that's when he gets a message that Shoto wants to see him, right? Let's see here. Oh, no, that's when he gets a message and sees the scoreboard, and he sees that Sorrento got the Jade key after Artemis. And then 20 minutes after that, Shoto got the Jade key, but not Daito. And so Parzival doesn't think of anything of it. He kind of goes on with his life for a little bit, trying to get the Jade key. And that's when Shoto asks to see him. And Shoto only tells him this message. I just had it highlighted, and then I probably scrolled away from it. Shame on me. Basically, he said he needs to speak to Parzival about what Daito has left from his will. And I think Parzival's just kind of like, his will, why couldn't he just respawn his character and take the item back? Did I really just lose that thing? I think I went way too far down. So that's too bad, because I had it highlighted in a great spot too, where it describes Daito. Oh, here, this is what I'll do. Find Daito. Know what happened to Daito, but common assumption was that he'd been killed by the Sixers. Yes, but they're thinking of just his avatar was killed by the Sixers. And that's when, that's why they didn't think anything of it. And then, of course, Sorrento, I think immediately soon after, ends up with the crystal key. So not only did he get the Jade key and go through the second gate, but he ends up with the crystal key. And now Parzival is just feeling like, oh, this is, it's almost the end of the world for this poor guy. So I could have swore I told him the debt, okay, my ship was fast and blah blah blah. I cannot believe. Oh, here, let me do. I know this sounds terrible, but oh, it's not on this page. I think this is the page where Artemis found the jade key. And then here now, Sorrento had just become the first person to find and clear the second gate. As a result, his avatar now stood in first place. So he even says, I sat frozen staring at Sorrento's employee number. Just everything's kind of going to shit in his world right now, and he's really upset about it. So there it is. All right. So here's the part where, Shoto tells Parzival that Daito was killed. And Parzival says, you mean killed his avatar? And it says here, Shoto shook his head. No, they broke into his apartment, pulled him out of his haptic chair, and threw him off his balcony. He lived on the 43rd floor. So this is while Daito and Shoto were trying to beat the challenge to get the jade key. So let me talk about that real quick before I bring you down in the dumps with this good news. The jade key was basically the hint was to go to this world where it's based on the game of Zork. I don't know if you guys played Zork. I think I played it once or twice, but I don't know much about it. When you finally you find the key, which you have to like collect these treasures throughout this White House that's in this world. And then when you collect treasures and you blow the whistle, the key appears, but then it was wrapped in this weird foil. Well, the foil is a key to the puzzle to get to the gate. Parzival doesn't quite figure that out yet. And so he puts it in his inventory and kind of goes back to doing what he's got to do. Then he meets with Shoto about Daito. And so Shoto opens up a browser window in the air beside us. Now, remember, they're virtually meeting. They're meeting in Oasis, not in real person. And it displays a Japanese newsfeed article. I tapped my index finger in Mandrax software, translated it to English. It says another otaku suicide, right? And it said that a young man, and Daito's real name was Toshiro Yoshiaki, right? He was aged 22, had jumped to his death from his apartment located on the 43rd floor of a converted hotel in Shinjuku, Tokyo, where he lived alone. I saw a school photo of Toshiro and beside the article, and it shows he was a young Japanese man with long, unkept hair and bad skin. He didn't look anything like his Oasis avatar. So poor Shoto is grieving the loss of his best friend. And I think Wade asks the dumbest question in the world here. Are you sure he didn't really commit suicide? It's like, no. So he says they were engaged with the fight in Frobaz, which is part of the world in Zork. And that's how they defeated, they were able to defeat his avatar, is that during real world time, they took him out of the simulator and threw him off the building. So that's when Shoto tells Wade that my real name is Akihide. And I want you to know my true name. And it's like, it creates this bond of, sentimentality, because this shit's getting real and things are getting serious. So they, Wade tells him his real name, and they say thank you and on all this. And it's interesting because Shoto even says here that his real name was Toshiro. I didn't even know that until last night when I saw the news article. And that's when Wade asked, I thought he was your brother. And turns out they were just really good friends, kind of like best friends online, which is relatable. I mean, even my son, who is going to be 20 years old soon, his best friend is 17 and lives somewhere in California. My son's in Utah. I mean, that's his best friend in the world. a lot of this is relatable to kids nowadays. So that's what's interesting about this book. It does touch on people a lot of personal ways. So in the end, before the end of this meeting, I think Shoto gives Wade that capsule later on, basically as kind of a, I don't know, it was something that Daito wanted to bequeath to Parzival. So moving on from that point, before I get hung up on it, let me go back to the notes to stay on track. So death of Daito. Then the next piece of the puzzle is Blade Runner. So during these long paragraphs that you read through in the book, and Teresa came by and gave me a hug. But she's already gone. I love you, Teresa. I'm sorry. But basically, during these long paragraphs that you're reading through how Wade Watts is working through his head, the clues as to how to find the gate to use the Jade key, there's this weird foil piece. And then somehow he relates it to the movie Blade Runner. Now, I'm not talking about the new one with the young guy. What was his name? I'm talking about the original Blade Runner with Harrison Ford. And it was back in the 80s or 70s, right? So in the movie, there's the one guy folds origami pieces, the partner, right? And there's the unicorn. He folds a origami unicorn, and when Wade says the word unicorn, it automatically folds, and then he's able to kind of relate Blade Runner to a world in the Oasis. And from there, he finds the machine that basically Harrison Ford used to use. I'm not going to tell you all the details because I could just end up in the weeds again. But he ends up playing the game Black Tiger. And in order to, pass through, use the key for that gate, he has to beat the Black Tiger game. And interestingly, when he beats the game, before he gets the crystal key, he can actually, he sees this inventory of giant robots like Godzilla and Robotech and all this stuff. So there was this one, and I'm not very familiar with it. From what I understand, I actually had to look it up. Leopardin is like a Spider-Man, Japanese Spider-Man version, but it looks like Robotech, and it's a giant robot, and it's very powerful. So that's what Wade picks out of the inventory. And then all of a sudden there is a clue. And it is, I'm sorry for all of you that are religiously inapt, but the last clue is a red pentagram, basically, which is the symbol to Rush 2112. I'll admit, I had no idea what a pentagram was when I was a kid, and I loved Rush. I still do. And 2112 was the first cassette tape I had. So now you can kind of see why I really love Ready Player One. I love the 80s references all throughout, including Rush. So I got really excited when I read this part, and I knew as soon as I saw this part here that said a red 5-pointed star enclosed in a circle, I was like, Rush 2112. So when he mentions it, I was just like, I was thinking of the 10 temple shrinks and all this in my mind. So to quit nerding out, nerdy birdie, he finally gets this final riddle for the crystal key. And that's when Wade Watts realizes that in Sector 21, there was an area in Oasis called Syrinx. So that's part of the lyrics to 2112's album. So let me see what time I'm at. Wow, I'm doing a great job. I'm at 25 minutes. Wow. Okay. Oh, you're not gone? Oh, that's fantastic. I keep looking over at how many viewers there are, and it says 0, but love to see you, Teresa. Thank you. I'm just rambling on, and of course, I start rambling about the pentagram stuff right when you're there. But it's true, I do see a lot of those symbolisms in Rush's albums too. But I mean, where is it not at? So I'm going to kind of stumble through the next part here because I mean, I know that Rush, that was the last piece to the Crystal Key. I just don't exactly remember when I read, books, every detail, unless I kind of refresh my memory. So we'll go to the next page and just kind of wing it like Forrest Gump. And he pulled up a scan of 21's 12 original fold out album sleeve. And then he starts looking at the lyrics. And he goes to the planet in Oasis to the Temple of Syrinx. So I think from there, I found a raised stone altar, the 5-pointed red star etched into the surface. Well, that sounds very demonic. But what kind of offering? So he's kind of thinking of what he's supposed to offer. It's a riddle of some sort. So he's thinking, and you can see just through all these paragraphs, I mean, you really have to pay attention to the detail to really see how they find the keys and everything. So I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of this. I just know that, let's see here, transformed. Okay. So he returned the temple and placed the guitar on the altar. And as I did, the towering computers around me began to emit a cacophony of sound. And that's when he got the crystal key. All right. When he reached out, and then his scoreboard increased. So he's back up on the scoreboard, and he's caught up to Sorrento, Artemis, and all of them. Then here's the weird part, okay? Character symbol of James Halliday, Dungeons and Dragons, Castle Anorak. His avatar was Avatar's impregnable stronghold, okay? In the first few years of the hunt, I was going to say, I think after this, there's like this lull for like a year. They'd arrive earlier that day, and he goes on in these details about where these ideas came up for all these keys and these gates and all this stuff. So there was a chance the Sixers hadn't figured out how to open the third gate yet. Of course, I had plenty of time now. They could be slow and methodical sooner or later. Okay. So this is kind of where he talks about how he never leaves his apartment. Going outside is highly overrated. So this poor kid doesn't leave this apartment that he has rented for himself under an assumed identity for a year, right? His only companion in that apartment is his virtual assistant in the form of Max Headroom. So he's always talking to Max in here. You got it, Chief. If any of you remember Max Headroom, he was kind of like a glitchy personality. And then he talks about IOI. So before I go any further and get everything mixed up, I don't want to miss anything, because the next piece is pretty complicated when you're talking about his strategy to infiltrate IOI. In the movie, it was Samantha, Artemis, who ends up in IOI's care because they somehow kidnapped her or got her, and she ended up as a part of IOI's servitude slaves, right? In the book, it's not her, it's Wade, who actually doesn't get captured. He kind of lets them capture him, but he has everything planned out. And we'll talk about it because it's very interesting. So I think in the next video I make, it's going to just mostly be details from the book, because none of it's in the movie. And so since I'm at 30 minutes and I've kind of jabbered on, I see Teresa is still here listening to me jabber, but I am getting tired. It's almost 9 o'clock, and I'm going to wait for Bobby to call me and say goodnight. So I hope this wasn't quite as crazy as it sounded like it was to me. The cats have calmed down, so it's time to eat. So thanks for stopping by, Teresa. I love you. very much. And anybody else that has any other ideas or any other books, I'm always open to trying to read new things. I'm getting a little tired of Stephen King. I'm not going to lie. I mean, if you read that too much, you just end up going to a dark place. So I'm going to try to look for something that's a little more, like this book was a lot of fun. Ready Player One puts a good feeling in your chest, especially when you get that nostalgia. So that's what the reading is really about. If you're doing a book report and you're just cheating by watching these and trying to get out of reading the books, well, that's your prerogative. So I will probably make another video next week and try to finish up Ready Player One. I know I've got a lot of videos. I'm not even halfway through The Shining, but like I said, after a while of reading Stephen King, you just got to stop for a while. So it's good stuff. It's just taxing. So thanks for joining me, nerdy birdies, and I'll see you guys again in the next video.